Welcome to the National Science and Technology Medals Foundation's STEM Spotlight Series, where we're meeting the top minds in STEM to learn more about their paths to success. I'm Sarah Williams, a science journalist. Talking with me today is Afua Bruce, the Chief Program Officer of DataKind, a company that brings cutting-edge analytics and data science to leading social change organizations, tackling issues like education, poverty, health, and human rights. Afua is also a AAAS If-Then ambassador, and before joining DataKind, she helped lead the White House National Science and Technology Council, has worked on science and technology strategy for the FBI, and was a software engineer at IBM. Thanks so much for joining me today, Afua. You've had some really neat jobs that mix science, technology, and policy. What led you to this area? What's your background?
I started my career off as a software engineer. I knew from the time I was probably in middle school that I wanted to go into computers. I also knew that because of the way my parents brought me up, my parents immigrants from Ghana, and just the idea that you would always be a part of your community, you would always find ways to serve your community, that was ingrained into me from a very young age. So even as I graduated from high school, majored in computer engineering in college, and went out into the world, I always found time and really prioritized giving back to my community. So I went to business school and had planned to go back to IBM, but then when the FBI recruited on campus, I realized that I could now take my desire to serve my community, to serve my country in this case, and combine it with some of the technical expertise I had. And so at that point, I shifted from a career path really in the private sector and that IBM track of doing computer engineering that way, and really looking for ways that I could marry my technical expertise with service to society. So from there, I spent time in the FBI and the White House and just working with different governments and government agencies across the country. And really now I've realized that I can combine my ideas of how do I improve societies, that policy angle to actually change some of the structures with my technical expertise and combine them together to really make a difference through technology and policy.
Give me an example of how a project might play out, or, a good example of why data science is so important to some of these organizations.
Sure. So an organization may come to us with a question about just their general operations, saying, we're conducting business as we usually do, but is there a way that we can do it better? We've done some projects in the education space, for example, working with colleges to help identify the most useful intervention points for students and to help them graduate. We worked with a particular college, for example, to look at the percentage of students that got a large percentage of their credits completed, but did not end up graduating. We were then able to run some analysis on the data and identify different intervention points for the university so that they could connect with the students at the appropriate points and in the appropriate ways to actually get students to graduate and therefore be able to gain employment related to their degrees, to be able to gain jobs that would let them pay back any student loans they'd taken back. We've also worked with organizations in the healthcare space and with transportation. For example, we partnered with one particular organization which uses community health workers to deliver care to individuals who need care in the community. And we were able to take a look at the routes that the individuals from the organization use to go from house to house, from person to person to deliver this care, and to run a route optimization algorithm to help take different data sources from different times of the day, from the different routes that people would take, and really optimize the routes so that people could deliver care more quickly and more efficiently.
In a lot of ways, politicians and social change advocates and humanitarians speak a totally different language than scientists and engineers. How do you bridge this gap? What are the biggest challenges in setting up these partnerships?
This skill set to speak different languages, I think, is one of the key skills that's required to be successful in deploying technology in service of a community, in service of humanity. As you look at developing policy, as you look at having interventions that truly affect and improve people's lives, it requires bringing multiple different people to the table, people who look different from each other, people who have different expertise than each other, and really recognizing the value that each different expertise expertise and each different perspective brings to the table. From there, you really have to work hard to know how to, for yourself individually, distill down some of the language and jargon that you may use in your own space, and how do you translate that to someone else so that they can start to engage with the information that you need to do your job. And similarly, you have to work to ask the right questions, to probe deeper and recognize that, yes, even as an engineer, you may really need the housing expert to tell you, how does housing work? Why do people not have access to housing? What interventions could actually be most helpful, so that you can actually then go and develop some code that may help an organization operate more efficiently, that may then inform policy better. It's really about building a really inclusive table that includes people from different perspectives and working hard to bring all of that expertise together to one specific product, one specific policy, or towards whatever goal you're working towards.
I think there are a lot of young people who love science or engineering or innovation, but are also really driven to make a change in the world and care a lot about social issues and would love to combine these passions. Is this convergence of science with social change an area where you see opportunities expanding in coming years?
I absolutely see these opportunities expanding in coming years. I think that as people understand the work that is done in the social sector a little bit more, as people become more involved in their communities, as people look to say, we've had a protest, we've had a social media campaign, but what can we actually do? I think people will start to say, well, how can I bring my skill set, whatever it is, to actually advance the issues that I care most about? And I think science and technology can really be a vehicle to that. There, has been some fabulous work done in the past by Virginia Eubanks, who wrote a book called Automating Inequality, and Mutale Nkonde and Jesse Daniels, who've worked on racial literacy in tech, and really talk about how when social sector organizations, when governments get technology wrong, it really exacerbates the inequalities in society. It really turns into unnecessarily surveilling already disadvantaged populations. It turns into further disenfranchisements of different communities. It really has an impact on the quality of life people can have and the ways that people can show up in society and the ways that people can even contribute to society. So I think as the awareness of this increases, people will be able to see a clearer path to combining those skills. I also think that if the nonprofit sector isn't for you, that more and more companies are going to recognize that they need people who have these skill sets, and they need people who can combine a passion for science and technology and a passion for social justice and a passion for equity together. Again, the algorithms that affect lives for access to housing, for access to food, for even access to financing, these are all algorithms that reflect what the people who design them think and any biases they have. And so people who have been trained to really understand the nuances and understand a social context will be, I think, even more and more valuable to the private sector corporations as well.
Your career has required a lot of skills outside normal science training, policy management and strategy and leadership. What has it taken to gain expertise and confidence in those areas?
It has taken a lot of work, frankly. There's no easy way to get a wide variety of skill sets. But I think another thing it's taken is just being comfortable with the idea of changing my focus and changing what I learn. I think that when I was younger, especially in high school and even in college, I thought that I had to pick a particular career path. I thought that I had to pick a particular discipline, and I could only use certain skills and only apply those skills in certain ways in order to be successful. And I found myself struggling for some time because even though I was a trained engineer, I really wanted to volunteer with the local Red Cross as we responded to different small-scale disasters in the community. I found myself wanting to do more of the STEM education and outreach efforts. And so I really struggled with, how do I be a stereotypical engineer when I have all of these interests? And I think what the policy world has taught me, what my business degree also taught me, is that you don't have to pick. If you have multiple interests, you can pursue them all. It may take you on a different path than it takes other people, but that's absolutely fine. I really like where I have landed. If you told me when I started my career that I would have worked at the White House as an engineer, that I would lead a policy council, that I would be working with organizations and NGOs and governments across the world on how to really improve communities, I don't know that I had a category for any of those activities when I was starting my career. But I'm so glad that I worked, and I decided to listen to myself when I said, there are other interests I have. How do I learn more about them? And then how do I put these skill sets to work?
Have you had really great mentors or received particularly good pieces of advice along the way?
Yes, I've been so fortunate to have a number of great mentors. I could not even name them all right now because there's so many people who have given me different levels of advice and have spoken life and encouragement to my career at critical points. I think one thing, though, that I do think about when I talk about mentorship, though, is really having a board of directors. And so rather than trying to identify one particular mentor for myself, I identify different people who I have access to or sometimes don't have access to, and I just follow them and try to learn from them. So some people on my board of directors I actually know really well and make a point to call once a month and say, here's what's going on in my life, and here's what I'm thinking about, here's what I'm struggling with, what advice do you have for me? And some people, honestly, and what I refer to as my personal board of directors, I don't actually know personally. I follow them on Twitter, I listen to their talks, and gain inspiration and ideas for what to do with my own life and my own career, just from guidance that I can get from them from afar.
Is there a particular idea or concept that's really what drives you forward and gets you up every morning, or an area that you see yourself potentially having an impact on society?
That's a great question. I think one thing that gets me up every morning is, how do I bring more people into the fold of wanting to combine their technical skills with their passion for social justice, with their passion for strengthening communities, with their passion for doing good in the world, and how do I create an avenue for that? DataKind has been a great place for me to do this because that's our mission. And so I get to wake up every day and get paid for every day thinking about, how do we get more volunteers? How do we give volunteers proactive, structured ways to engage so more people understand this skill set, more people develop this skill set, and more people can do this work. But even outside of DataKind, I'm just so passionate about different ways that we can really work to address some of the structural inequalities that we have in our system, some of the challenges we have of making sure people have access to security and safety. And I really like just working on those challenges and making sure I can bring more people into the fold. There's space for so many more people. There are a lot of people doing this work already. There are a lot of people who've been doing this work of how do you combine technology and society for a long time. But there's a lot of space for more people.
If you could give one piece of advice to students who are trying to figure out what they want to do in the world and how to find their way, what would it be?
Go with what your passion is. And when I say go with what your passion is, it can just be what your passion is at the moment. I know sometimes it can be overwhelming to decide at one point, to decide today, for example, what am I truly passionate about and what do I want to do for the rest of my life? You don't need to decide right now what you want to do for the rest of your life. Decide today what you want to do for the next year or what you want to do for the next 6 months. And that can be reaching out and talking to different individuals who can help guide you. It can be taking a class. It can be learning something. It can be starting to apply what you've learned, starting to test out, how do I combine my different interests, or how do I advance my one passion and actually move that forward and actually continue to make a difference. So I would say, consider what your passion is today and just work towards that.
What are you reading, watching, or listening to right now, STEM related or not?
I've been reading a lot of books about the intersection between the internet and racial justice and bias. So I just reread, actually, Sophia Noble's Algorithms of Oppression. I just started Black Software, which is by Charlton McElwain. And I'm really enjoying these books about the intersection of the internet, of technology, of algorithms, and of justice.
Thanks for joining us today. I'm Sarah Williams, and this is the National Science and Technology Medals Foundation's STEM Spotlight Series.